Okay, John, we have recording going on Zoom and we are on Facebook.
Thanks, Chrissy. Let's call the meeting to order then. This is meeting of the Village of Shorewood Hills Plan Commission. Tonight is Tuesday, December 9th. It is 7:01 p.m. Chrissy, would you like to do the roll call?
Sure. John Imes,
Present.
Jim Etmansek. I got you. I see you. Okay. Kara Colburn Ferris. I don't see her on yet. Mark Letter.
Here.
Shabnam.
Oh, sorry. I'm here, Chrissy.
Okay. Yep. I was just about to call your name. Thank you. And Tessa Martin.
Here.
And Craig Weinhold.
Here.
Okay, that's everybody except for Kara. I'll keep an eye out for her though.
Thanks for that, Chrissy. Item 3, just want to confirm compliance with open meeting laws.
Yes, the meeting
Brian,
was
Chrissy?
properly, yep, the meeting was properly posted.
Splendid. Thanks for that. And then item 4, approval of the minutes from November 12th. Those were in the packet. Hopefully you had a chance to review those. If so, I look for a motion for acceptance.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thanks, Craig. Is there a second? Mark, thank you for that. Ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. That motion, those minutes are approved. Item 5, public comments. This is an opportunity for community members to speak to the committee. No discussion or action may take place at this time, and speakers may be limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comments this evening? Public comments. Any public comments this evening?
Yeah, I speak, John. Kurt Hansen.
Hey, Kurt, good to see you. Yeah, you've got the floor.
Thank you. I again want to thank you all for your service. I think you have some great agenda items tonight, and I'm so pleased to see them there. Number 6, discussing the floor area ratio. I think that definitely needs to be modified because I don't think the current way it's been done in the past is defensible. The retaining walls was also an issue that was brought up the last time I was in front of the ZBA, so I think that's a very important issue. And of course, the off-street parking requirements will be another issue that comes back to the ZBA as I anticipate the Sweetbriar property to again be appealed to the ZBA since Brian has now approved the building permit for at least 1202 Sweetbriar. So thank you so much for putting those on the agenda. I should just let you know, I know there's that, if you aren't aware, I wasn't aware until Craig told me that residents can submit ordinances, and there's a process for doing that, then where you guys will have to hold a public hearing about that. I'll certainly be submitting at least one ordinance that I think should be changed. And so I'm just alerting you to that issue. So yeah, thank you all, and I hope you all enjoy the holidays.
Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate that. All right. Any other public comments? Let's see. I don't see other members of the public on here. So I think we'll proceed to item 6, discussion floor area ratio FAR modifications. The goal for this discussion tonight is to provide Sonia Priso at Vanderwall with some directional guidance to draft proposed ordinance revisions and have those be discussed at the January meeting. The intent is not to finalize language, but to agree on some of the problems we're trying to solve and the direction we want Sonia to take when drafting ordinance updates. And what's really resonating with me is the need for simplicity. I've heard that from the Plan Commission, and certainly we want to try to do that with this as well. Our task is to preserve the original intent of the FAR ordinance, establishing reasonable limits on mass and height while addressing any loopholes, ambiguities that were not anticipated when the FAR was originally drafted. So you remember we had lots of background. We had some discussion on this over the summer. Brian, was there anything you wanted to add with respect to the fire discussion? You're muted, or I can't hear you.
Okay, now.
Now we can, yeah.
Okay. When we last had that discussion, we had presented some of the information or prelim feedback pertaining to the basement, garage, and some of the garage or basement calculations and what constituted floor area ratio for that piece of the equation. I know the commission in the past has spoken to some of the resident requests and interest in pursuing some potential avenues for existing properties to be modified without having any exterior visible modifications or additions to existing properties in the village. So it's just something that I think it's time to bring this discussion back, hear what the commission members think about this. I've invited Town and Country Engineering to accompany us this evening. I see Tim has joined the meeting here. So this is more of a forum to just get everyone's kind of opinions on where we're going to take things next, and have our consultants weigh in and give some advice as to some of the pros and cons or unintended consequences of what we might be thinking of doing.
Thanks for that, Brian. I know we've talked in the past about having an interior remodeling exemption. We previously talked about allowing interior finishing of attics, basements, even if the FAR was exceeded for existing homes in the village. I'd start off the discussion with that. Folks thought about that a little bit more. Is that something that we continue to be interested in? I know we've heard from residents that wanted to do those kinds of modifications. And we haven't made the changes in the ordinance to necessarily allow it. So I'll just put that on the table for starters. Thoughts, reactions? Jim?
And I think we ought to make those kind of changes. I mean, it's been quite a while since we developed this, and it was really developed about mass. It wasn't anything to do with what was going on inside of the bulk. And so if it's penalizing people who have basements or attics that they want to finish, I just think that's not what the intent was at all.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. Craig, I see your hand up.
Yeah, when we talked about this over the summer, we kind of ran into some challenges with what constitutes an interior remodel. How long is there a period of time that it would have to pass before it becomes acceptable and so forth? And some of the discussions got kind of technical and kind of got wound up, and we had some feedback from the village engineer, who talked about some of the practical aspects and also about how there might be some legal issues with it. And at the time, we sort of were thinking that if we could just remove some of the ambiguities about attic space in particular. Right now, it's very subjective. What's an attic? But if that could be turned into something as concrete, something that Brian Berquist could measure from plans and see, get that mass number, then whatever people do within that mass, including all interior remodeling, is fine. And so we sort of, at least I sort of stopped thinking about trying to allow interior remodeling and started focusing on how to make it easy for Brian Berquist to calculate the mass in any property and have it be fair, and then leave the internals to the homeowner.
Thanks, Craig. Mark?
Yeah, I'm not sure why you even need to bother to calculate the mass. I mean, if you've got an existing structure and all you want to do is finish the interior of that structure, and you're not going outside that envelope, I'm not sure what the calculations are, what they need to be.
Go ahead, Craig.
The devil's advocate for that
Yeah.
is a new home is constructed with a massive attic that is inaccessible, so it doesn't count towards FAR. And then the moment it's built, They punch a hole, add an elevator or stairway, remodel the interior, and have an extra, whatever, 1,000 square feet. So, you know, the question is, you know, existing houses, how long do they have to exist? There was some talk about maybe it has to be an owner occupied property, you know, someone's lived there for 3 years before they can do that interior remodel or something like that. You know, we started kind of talking in circles about all the different weird scenarios that might pop up.
I'm just to take your example then, Craig. I mean, if they built this home that complies with FAR, it's a big home, it's got a big attic. What do we care whether at some point they decide to finish that large attic or not? If they haven't changed the envelope and the envelope complied with FAR, I don't know that I care what they did to that interior space.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, again, that's the ambiguity right now, is that attic space principally. The attics are only counted if they are habitable. And then there's different types of roof structures that have different amounts of headroom about how livable is that space. You know, at Cape Cod, it's a full second floor, even though the roof is encroaching on it, where a big gable roof can be pretty significant.
Your headphones are working, Moms.
Well, it still seems to me though that if the house would have been permitted under FAR, but the refinishing of the attic would not. Okay, that's kind of the situation I think you're setting forth, right? Where the house otherwise complies with FAR. And now all they're doing is going into that attic space, not enlarging it in any way, but just finishing it. From a resident of the village, the building is going to look the same to me. It's not changing that. So again, I continue to question, what's the interest of the village in restricting the finishing of that attic? I mean, I just don't want to overthink this thing.
Can I ask Mark a question?
Go ahead, Shabnam.
Mark, my question is, could you get to the same outcome by just removing attic from the calculation to make it easier?
I don't know. That might be a problem. I don't even know if I want to define attic in this exception. I mean, I'm not sure that what I'm concerned about is the building envelope. Okay, how big the structure is in all dimensions. And I don't really care whether, as long as the home meets FAR, do I care whether at some future date they refinish some or create some finished space that was previously unfinished but inside the envelope?
Do you see how, like, I think, and I would welcome, maybe there's something you're seeing I'm not seeing, but including the attic in the FAR calculation, which would make a home which would make the attic unfinished. But then it's in the envelope, so you are going to finish it now. It's call it a loophole, but you're getting to the same outcome as if we were to just not include attic in the calculation.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, if that's true, then that's fine. I'm just not sure that would be the case. That if you ignored the attic entirely and then later finished it, would you come out with the same result if you exempted the attic? I'd have to think that one through.
I don't know how I got a thumbs up going, but I guess if you do this, I didn't mean to thumbs up, but whatever.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to see this. I guess maybe I'm being too simplistic, but I'm taking an existing home. It has an existing envelope. And as long as you're not enlarging that envelope, what's the village's interest? Do we have any? I don't think we do.
I think that I agree with you. I agree with you. I think it's ridiculous that we are regulating attic space. But so I agree with you. I just think that removing attic space versus allowing interior remodeling, you're going to always get to the same outcome.
And look, I'm not trying to define what the modification that would be necessary to the ordinance to accomplish this. I'm just focusing right now on what the goal is from my perspective, and not the means to achieve it. And all I'm saying is my goal would be, you got an existing home, you can do whatever you want, subject to the building codes, inside that envelope.
You know, can I just, I thought Mark made an excellent point that it doesn't matter at this moment to figure out the means to achieving it. But what his point is why are we regulating attic space? Do we all agree that we don't want to regulate attic space? How we get there is a charge for Vanderwall.
Right.
But our point here is to figure out, is that something we want or not?
Yeah, and I would not confine it solely to attics. I would include basements as well. It's just any space inside the home that you choose to finish that space, you should be able to do it as long as you're not enlarging the envelope. And you're right, I think we just turn it over to Sonia at Vanderwall and say, this is what we want to accomplish, and find the simplest, least controversial way to go about it.
So I saw a lot of heads nodding. Is there an agreement also that we don't want to regulate basements?
So-
Yeah.
I'm kind of agree with that too. Like
Yeah.
you could leave it as storage or you make it a playroom or whatever. It's a basement.
Well, basements are more complicated because basements are often exposed, sometimes greatly exposed. There's one house in the village where 3 sides of the basement are exposed. Does that count as a basement? Well, this is a subjective thing, and something that Brian Berquist has to struggle with. A lot of times you'll have 2 houses that look quite similar, and one of them will have an exposed basement, and the other one will have a, partially submerged first floor. And again, that's kind of a design strategy for houses now, is to use the basement as a full floor and expose it more than historical. The historical houses, a basement's a basement. It's underground. That's where we go when tornadoes come. That's not quite true for some of the new houses coming in.
Sorry, I'll raise.
Go ahead, Shamno.
Okay, so that's a great question. We seem to be in agreement that we don't want to regulate basements. I also, I think if it's a basement on Lake Mendota Drive, nobody can see it. It's not, if it's about the look of the building, you're not going to see it. But then I think Craig does make a point. What is the definition of a basement so that it could be excluded? There's so much you could do with the dirt around your house to manipulate basement. I agree we should remove it, but I think you have to know what a basement is so that you don't have a 3-floor building and you're just calling the first floor a basement because you want to. So defining basement would be nice.
I think one of the pieces within this too, when I had this conversation with Brian, and Tim might be able to speak to this, but would the commission consider like the addition of egress windows in a basement or a dormer, any of those types of modifications to an existing property to constitute an exterior envelope change? Or would that fall under the kind of same idea that it's not technically modifying the house envelope? I mean, these were just parts of the discussion as to this whole basement conversation and things that could come from that.
Yeah, I would say, Brian, as long as it's not enlarging the envelope,
Right,
I really don't have a problem with it. So
right.
they want to put in a window, they want to put in a door,
Yep.
just not an issue for me. It's only if they want to expand that room. And I don't want this to get all caught up in the FAR calculations. I guess is what I'm saying is if the house meets FAR, based on because it was grandfathered or because it was newly built, but it complied with FAR as FAR exists today. And I understand there's some issues about interpreting FAR, but let's just set that aside for the moment. If it meets FAR, and it just so happens that some of the space in the house is unfinished, I don't have a problem with them finishing it. But I think it first has to meet FAR. Okay, that's step one, if you will. And then step two is if you complied with FAR, then you can go ahead and finish these spaces. I guess I just didn't want to complicate this whole matter by changing the definition of FAR, except to provide a provision that says for an existing space, as long as you're not enlarging the space, you can finish the space.
Yeah,
I mean, I I understand what you're saying, but I just want to avoid those complications if at all possible.
Thanks, Mark. That's helpful. Craig, and then Shabnam, I think I saw.
So, Mark, what if a interior change creates more floor area and then it's no longer compliant with FAR? And then there's another remodel that comes up, a year or two down the road. It's one of your first statements was that if it complies with FAR, then anything that they can do internally is fine. What if it no longer complies with FAR then for that second remodel?
Well, if it no longer, if they do so you're talking about two remodels essentially, right? So the house meets FAR, it has some unfinished spaces. They finish those spaces without expanding the envelope. That's okay. And then subsequently they say, oh, we're going to put an addition on the house, or we're going to somehow change the envelope.
No, not change the envelope. They're going to, maybe they did the basement at first. First
Yeah.
remodel was the basement and the second remodel was the attic.
right.
I don't have a problem with it. I
Yeah.
don't think I do. I mean, maybe I will if I think about it long enough, but I don't think I do. The home hasn't, from a visual standpoint, from a resident walking by, the home looks just the way it did before. So why
Yep.
do I care? What's the village's interest?
Well, and just to finish that though, because you had originally said that if it originally meets FAR, and one option is to say if a house exists today, then we could care less about FAR except for things that change the envelope. So remodels, when if new building permits and building permits that enlarge the space would be subject to FAR, but other types of remodels would not be subject to FAR, and the calculation wouldn't even be done in those. That would be maybe one way to solve this.
Yeah. I'm just looking for the easiest solution,
Yeah.
the simplest solution to the problem. But I do believe that residents ought to be allowed in an existing home to do their finishing any space within that envelope that they want to. It just doesn't bother me. I mean, we can let the devils to the details to Sonia and Vanderwall. But that's my goal. That's what I'd like to see happen.
Thanks, Mark. So, Shabnam?
I think I would like whatever ordinance we have to not differentiate between new and existing homes. Like it should just be standard for everybody, not what is the date your house is built. I guess I don't understand new versus existing homes. Could we just not differentiate between them?
I don't think we need to. If it's a new home, okay, it has to meet FAR. Okay. But once it meets FAR, it can do what it wants with that unfinished space, I guess is what I'm saying. First, it has to meet FAR if it's a new home. If it's an existing home, I don't care whether it's in compliance with FAR or was grandfathered.
Here's the problem, Mark. And I want to stop talking because I saw Tessa raise her hand. I'll just make a quick comment. The problem, though, is you could build a huge 4,000 square foot house with one floor, and it meets FAR because it's just a one floor house. But now that I have met FAR and I've built the building, I would like to just do interior remodeling and add a second floor and extra
No.
stuff. But
No,
that's
no,
isn't
no,
that
no,
interior
second
remodeling?
floor.
The exterior of the building is not changing. Do you know right? I could build a huge house with one floor with very tall ceilings. And now that I have my huge house with only, one floor, I'm going to go in and insert floors because it's interior remodeling.
And okay, take that example. Why should I care? If I
Yeah.
walk by that house when it's first constructed with a one floor, tall ceilings, whatever, it has a certain appearance and it met FAR. Now they go and they do a remodel. It's got a 20-foot ceiling, so now they're going to put in a second floor, but it's all within the existing envelope. Why do I care?
Well, I think that
That's right.
you could ease, that is a very easy loophole. That is a very easy loophole. I could build a 4,000 square foot house on my 3,000 limits by just removing floors and inserting them later. I could easily manipulate the rules, very easily. I don't know why my hand is up. I'm not trying to do anything, but these things keep turning on.
Sorry. Hey, Tessa, you're up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Mark, and I think it's not only that a new build meets FAR, it's all of the other requirements of a new build. Like if it's meeting the setbacks, if it's meeting all of the other requirements of a new build, I can't imagine that someone's going to build a warehouse size property just to add floors later on. But regardless, if it meets all of the requirements of a new build, we don't have a right to say you can't build it that way because you might finish your attic later. Like, it's going to be built regardless of what their future plans are for that home. And if it meets all the requirements of a new build, then I agree. I don't think that there's a need to, it's going to be built regardless. So what they do down the line, if it meets all the other requirements, is not our business.
Other thoughts, reactions? I mean, we could also, when we could ask that question of Sonia as well as she's putting this together and just go, is there an easy way to address that concern, or maybe it's not a concern? Craig?
Shabnam, you can go see that house up on Tally Ho. So the new construction up on, not Tally Ho, on Topping. The new house up on Topping is about a 4,000 square foot, one-story house. The basement is another 4,000 square feet with massive windows that are kind of excavated out. You can't see them from the road. So to Mark's point, why do we care? But so now it's already, a 6,000 or 7,000 square foot house, and then it has very high gabled ceilings. I don't think they have any intent. I think they just like cathedral ceilings, but having one story with cathedral ceilings everywhere, it's kind of strange. And someone creative, a creative architect, all of a sudden, could make that into an 8,000 square foot house. So anyway, we have an example right here that we can go look at. Not saying it's nefarious. May just be someone who likes a big ground floor, and that's fine.
No, I think that's a good example, Craig. It's like that house was permitted under FAR, presumably, right? Okay, so now they're doing something on the interior. I don't know what they're going to do, but do I care? It has the exact same appearance as it did the day before. So anyway, I mean, maybe as Sonia thinks through it, she'll figure out some circumstance that is problematic, but so far it just doesn't trouble me. I that's just me.
One easy thing that I think we can maybe ask Sonia to look at is the idea of garage credits. My understanding is that every new house has a garage of at least 500 square feet, and we give a 500 square foot garage credit, which has been the source of a lot of problems when it's in the basement. One easy change would be to simply say, hey, let's increase the FAR ratio by 500 square feet and get rid of that garage credit. Just give everyone extra 500 square feet and remove the garage from the language. And that would simplify the rules, not effectively change any modern house, the rules around it. And it would solve that basement garage issue that's been kind of a thorny issue.
Now you switched gears, didn't you, Craig?
Sorry, I wanted to bring something up that might be easier.
No, I just want to make sure that we were talking about something else here now. And that's fine. Okay.
I think Kara wanted to say something.
Yeah, Kara, go ahead. Sorry.
So, sorry again for being late. What Craig just said about the garage credit or whatever you call it, I think that's sort of consistent with my understanding of the intent of the FAR, which was related to sort of footprint and but I guess just stepping back, what again is the problem that we're trying to solve?
No, it's a good point. I think, what I said when we started was, the FAR was adopted in 2006. It was really a response to oversized homes and neighbor impacts. And what we're saying as a commission, the discussion we're having today is for stuff that's already built, that envelope exists, that mass exists. It went through the FAR most likely, or was grandfathered in, and residents should, as their lifestyles change, as maybe they have a parent that wants to come live with them, they've got some attic space that's available, they've got some basement space, they have space within that envelope that can be made livable or can be remodeled or whatever it is. That shouldn't be subject to further FAR analysis because you're not changing the mass, to Jim's point. And so I think I'm hearing pretty broad agreement on that and enough direction to give Sonia in terms of addressing that with ordinance language that we can discuss at the January meeting and move that process forward and give her a few nuances, like someone wants to come in, build a house with a 24-foot ceiling and then add that second floor after the fact and get a bigger home. If the mass is kind of fitting the neighborhood or it's fitting the FAR at that point, okay, good for them. They figured out a way to get some more square footage. But we'll give Sonia an opportunity to comment on that.
Yeah.
And Craig just added the garage issue, and Kara, I think you're spot on with the footprint issue. I mean, for folks that put a 1-story garage underneath their house, we did that certainly on Edge Hill. Mm-hmm. That reduced the footprint. And then we have an extra bedroom down there, and we have an extra bath down there. And that, we could have gone to, I don't know, I think our FAR, we could have had a 3,200 square foot box on that lot. And even with that third floor, I think we're at 2,400 square feet. And we found a way to make that garage fit in there. And for us, that worked. That strategy worked. We were well below our FAR allowance. But I don't think we want to do anything that discourages placement of garages under homes, because it is an
I would
efficient
agree with
way.
that.
Right. That's kind of my initial reaction. Shabnam.
I would like to see a change to the garage because the way we're interpreting it is not according to the plain language of the ordinance. So like cleaning that up expeditiously. But and would is so that's my first point. Two, but is Craig's suggestion warranted in just give everybody the 500 square foot so that we don't have a situation where your garage basement is counted versus not? Just he's trying to figure out a way to equalize it. The issue we have right now is that you're not actually interpreting your statutes or your ordinance according to the language. How do we fix this? And do we like Craig's suggestion? Everybody get 500 square foot equalizer. Or is there an alternative? I don't know.
I'm going to put Tim Stevie on. Tim, if you don't mind joining us, and I don't know if you have a reaction to that. I certainly don't have the FAR calculation sheet in front of me. I know there's been concerns expressed about the basement rules and it enabled negative FAR outcomes, unintentionally permitting larger above grade structures. Is that what we're trying to address, Craig, with your suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, the negative basement calculation is just it's an order of math issue in Excel that Brian Bergquist has, been using for years, and developers use it as a strategy now. But it doesn't match the language, as Shabnam says. If you read the language, it's quite clear what it says.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Not certainly in as depth as Brian Bergquist could. He's absolutely the person who's been doing that in our office for far longer than I have. But I think thinking of the current practice of how basements or basement garages and are counted within the ordinance would be exactly that, kind of akin to a credit at that point. So, Craig, I think my understanding of it and your suggestion of, well, what if you just converted that essentially to a credit, would be consistent with my understanding of it in terms of apples to apples there, because like you say, it does become a negative number at some point or in some circumstances, which is again akin to a credit at that point.
Mark?
Yeah, so Craig, in that circumstance, if you substitute the credit and give them 500 square feet, what if they don't build a garage? I mean, does that mean, they don't build the underground garage, they don't build the basement garage? Does that mean we're now looking at a house that the mass is now 500 square feet larger than it would otherwise have been, at least as far as the surface of the earth is concerned and above?
Yeah, well, I mean, except doesn't have the garage, so it loses that mass. But yes, that mass would be converted. And a good example would be my neighbor who converted her garage into living space. And now she parks on a surface spot, and she has no enclosed garage. And it's kind of like your envelope issue. Yes, she's in the same envelope. It's just
Right.
there's no garage door. There's a regular door.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that would mean that people potentially, to capture the additional 500 square feet, would not bother to build a garage.
It's possible. It's possible. We do have a few houses in the village that have carports. I've seen. Obviously, we have detached garages, and already the FAR handling of accessory structures is already a little complicated. So this would, kind of equalize that a little bit. It'd be the FAR would apply to all your structures, not separate for accessory structures, which are often garages. Frankly, I have a hard time thinking of people not putting a garage on a house. It's a choice someone could make when they've been living there for a while, but for a new house in Wisconsin winters, people like their garages.
Although many residents don't have them, or only have one-car garages instead
Yep.
of two.
Yeah, we have quite a few of the older houses. As far as I can tell, no new houses. Again, we one of the things I looked at with Brian Berquist was all FAR calculations over the last 3 or 4 years to see what people were asking for, and all the garages were 500 square feet or larger, maybe 450 in some cases, but everybody was doing 2-car garages.
Well, I would like to think about it a little bit more, but I do like the simplicity of this, that it cuts through a lot of the confusion. And it probably won't result in much additional mass. It's just the placement of that mass will maybe be a little different, but yeah. I'd look at that seriously.
We'll go to Shabnam and then Kara.
So just to go back to what Karen John said earlier about garages being in the basement because it reduces the mass, how would these changes or credits incentivize that? It seems like as a policy, we want to incentivize basement garages because it reduces the footprint.
You mean the existing FAR? How does the existing FAR incentivize? Or do you mean a proposed, how would we in a revised FAR?
Like moving forward, and maybe that's not a question for us, it's a question that we just give Vandewaal to answer, the means of how to get there. But are we in agreement that we want to incentivize basement garages because it reduces the footprint?
I mean, I think if we take out the special treatment of garages, that partially addresses that. The current FAR incentivizes garages because if you don't have, you get more footprint if you have a garage. Depending on how, I guess I kind of come back to my original question, which is what is the goal here? Are we interested in some notion of fairness? Are we interested in reducing footprints? Are we interested in some aesthetic preference? It's really not clear to me, and it hasn't been. Although I will say I do support the idea of not incentivizing 2-car garages and just giving equal treatment to whether it is a footprint garage or it's a 4-season porch or whatever.
Well, Craig, I see your hand up.
Two things. One is I did talk to the people who were involved in originally passing FAR, and they're unanimous in that there was never an intent to incentivize any sort of structure or any sort of specifically basement garages. That was never any intent, and that certainly the plain language of the ordinance doesn't have that. That's been kind of maybe one justification for things. But as basements go, they're still not invisible. If there's a garage door in a basement or a back door in a basement, or if the wall has been excavated out, those are no longer subterranean things that are out of sight, out of mind. They're now visible to neighbors and on all sides of the property, or whichever side they're facing. And that partial excavation has been an issue with basements. Where it's maybe considered a loophole, but it's certainly a design structure to have the basement be exposed just enough so that it counts as a basement, even though it might have great windows and be fully livable space that all the neighbors have to look at. So when it comes to that bulk of the structure, I would be hesitant to say, hey, if it's good today, then we can do anything we want. If one of those things is to excavate all the dirt around the house, so now instead of being 20 feet high, it's now 30 feet high because the basement is exposed. There's things like that, changes like that that do happen and have happened in the village. So I think we have to be careful with treating how basements are treated, because that has been an area of abuse.
I'm gonna, since we moved off topic, I just want to move back to the garage exemption and avoiding kind of the negative FAR outcomes. So it sounds like we can ask Sonia to kind of clarify that garage exemption to avoid that negative FAR outcomes. I think it would be good to have maybe Brian Berquist weigh in as well, with his thoughts on that. I just would like to see that maybe submit it to Sonia and have Sonia kind of consider that in the language that comes back to the Plan Commission. How does that sound to folks?
Yeah,
Mark?
yeah, it sounds good to me. I just think that our guiding principle here should be simplicity and clarity. We don't want any change that's going to make things more difficult for residents, more difficult for our contractors to figure things out. So as long as it's in that spirit, then I'm willing to look at it, as long as it's not adding a layer of complexity into an already overly complex code.
I mean, I will say sometimes sometimes codes and laws need to be complex to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that, I guess I would not put simplicity as the primary goal here. I would say getting it right. But I am concerned that we're kind of that policy preferences are being not being discussed as they should be. I think that there's some presumptions about kind of the policy choices that we want to make. And, I'm concerned, Craig, I don't know whom you spoke with and how you can be so sure that what the goals and what was intended by the original FAR and what wasn't intended. I'd be much more comfortable with leaning on the language of the FAR and what our village engineers have to say, rather than deferring to some claims about what some intent was when I don't know. Maybe you can tell us who passed the original FAR, and I'm concerned about those kinds of assertions. It's pretty broad.
Kara, thanks for that. I see Shabnam's hand up.
So I wanted to just write down what we have discussed so far and what it sounds to me like we're agreeing to. So I heard simplicity and clarity. We need simplicity and clarity in our ordinances. And I also wrote down allowing residents to remodel the interior of their homes, specifically the attics and the basements. Like that's a goal that we are in alignment on. With garages, I think we should talk through this more, even if it takes time, to see where we land. I think that's our job to do that, and not for Vanderwall to decide and for us to get it on the back. And let's figure it out. What do people want for garages?
I want garages treated like regular square footage.
Okay, and what does that mean?
That means that any sort of special language around garages and credits for underground garages based on how underground they are, and a 500-foot credit, I would say eliminate that and just allow for 500 more feet above ground and just stop talking about garages.
Okay, so Carrie, you're saying all garages are the same, whether you're underground, above ground, in the attic, wherever you want to put your garage, it's 500 square feet, you're all the same.
No, I'm just saying, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is square footage is square footage. It doesn't matter whether it's a garage, whether it's a 3-season porch, whether it's a bedroom. Square footage is square footage. And obviously square footage that is exposed and on, a first or second floor versus basement square footage is treated differently.
Okay. So you don't see any issue with the basement garages and that it forces a loophole and you get this 500 extra square feet. You're fine with that?
Well, that's under the current FAR, which allows, that's why I'm saying eliminating that special treatment of basements. And I don't know, I think Craig brought up that idea too, and maybe others agree as well. I do think it also is consistent with the goal of simplicity.
Okay, can I just ask like everybody else to just go around and say what they think about garages? I'm going to try to take notes so I can consolidate.
So
Martin?
I'll go ahead and start in on that, Shabnam. I'd said, make it very simple. I'd agree with Kara on this one. I think we just treat all the structures the same and not carve out the garages in a separate way. It simplifies the code. It doesn't really increase the mass. I mean, as far as the overall goal of FAR, I think the goal back then, and I think our goal now, is to control the mass. That's kind of the overriding consideration, and to do it, and I would say to do it in a way that's as simple as clear as we can and still achieve our objective, which is to limit the mass.
Okay.
I would add to that in a way that is fair. So
Other
Tessa?
reactions?
Jim?
That makes sense, Jim? Tessa?
I was one of the original writers, and so I've been around that long, and it was all about keeping the mass. That's what we were doing. What was the term back then was McMansions. We didn't want McMansions in Shore Hills. Okay, so how do we do that? And that's what we came up with, was doing this to kind of control the overall mass that on the outside. And yes, there's some things that went on to calculate garage stuff that probably none of us who actually were involved with the initial decision making even knew that was happening. But I think that when I look around, there was a few houses here that were built before the FARs were put in place, and you can tell they're just huge. I mean, you just go up topping and you look at the biggest houses there, those were the ones that were done before, and they were the reasons we did the FAR. And so it wasn't about garages. I mean, yeah, there's some issues, and I'm throw out the garages, include the garages. It wasn't a big thing. I mean, the whole intent was just to keep the size of houses reasonable, and so that was what we were intending at that time.
Thanks, Jim. That's helpful. Craig, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Jim was definitely on the 2006 Plan Commission. The other members were Lee Ashkenazi. She got back to me and doesn't remember any talk about underground garages. Peter Hans sounds like the interpretation ultimately adopted by the village engineer seems contrary to the language and intent of the ordinance. He also doesn't remember anything about it. Neither does Mark Sundquist. I did not get responses from Joyce and Bill. So there were two members who have moved on from either Shorewood or matters of politics. But anyway, the one side issue with any garage is that in our garden homes district and also in our comprehensive plan, we have a action item to kind of reduce the footprint of garage faces, basically to avoid snout homes. I don't think FAR is the right place to regulate that. So, but that is a garage concern that we need to kind of expect, just like we have a height restriction elsewhere. We should expect there's some other regulation somewhere to prevent a house to be dominated by a giant garage structure. But to the point in front of us, I think the only concern, and this is what Vandewalle would hopefully have some advice on, is Mark's concern about what if someone just goes without a garage? What if they just say, hey, we're just going to park on the street, and have 500 square foot more house on our small lot and do something like that. That would be, I think, the only concern. I think that's a small concern, but never know.
I mean, I don't think we regulate the number of cars people have or,
Kids, how many kids they have?
how many kids they have, how many garages they have.
Can I ask Tessa as well? Did you get a turn?
No, but to be completely honest, I don't have a strong opinion about garages and attics because this is so far from my expertise in my life, but I am always interested in what the experts do say. So, like the people who are lawyers are, the people that we consult with on these, I'm always interested to hear what they say, just because I don't feel like I have enough of a knowledge base in this particular topic to form a very strong opinion either way.
So everybody had it, or John, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm in agreement. I mean, this whole discussion so far has been about mass. Let's let folks do what they want within the existing mass. And I'm persuaded that, the garages, if we run into negative calculations, that's potentially an issue. So, but I want to hear from Brian. I want to hear from Sonia and how we can shape this. But I think we're going to achieve the objectives we want, which is this is about mass and this is about neighborhood character. But it's also flexibility for residents to remodel their homes or build a home in a way that fits their particular piece of property. And I think if we do that, we're going to avoid a lot of the angst and a lot of the confusion and a lot of the ambiguities that create problems in communities.
So I wrote, just for my notes to summarize what we're saying, treat all structures the same and don't treat them any differently. That was kind of the takeaway that I got. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think I'll speak out of turn. Are we willing to move on now to the fence code and retaining walls? Tim,
Yeah.
I think you've got a lot of good information you can share with Brian on this as well. And then Brian Mooney will be communicating with Sonia on the direction that the Plan Commission's providing, and she'll come back with some draft language for us to react to. Craig and then Shabnam.
So I think the basement, how basements are treated in terms of the exposed perimeter, especially with excavations. That's something that Brian Berquist has brought up several times. It's that the current language that we have today, if you read it, is completely flawed. And thankfully, Carl Franzen started using a different approach that's more sensible. So that language needs to be refined, and we can't just ignore basements because they're often excavated, including after the fact. So I'd kind of like to get people's thoughts about that. I think Vanderwall can maybe have some good guidance, but get people's read on how important basements are.
And Craig, that would be basements with respect to mass, right? That it's because this whole conversation about FAR is about mass. So it's about the massing of that basement, or is it about the appearance of the mass?
Well, it's the appearance. So the current language about basement is based on exposure. The percentage of the perimeter of the basement wall that is completely exposed. And that word completely exposed has been kind of abused. We'll have basements that are basically first floors that have a foot of dirt around the bottom, except where the door is. And then they count as basements rather than first floors. So
Shabna?
I just wanted to add for Brian Mooney, like Brian, for your attention, for when you work with Sonia, it's one thing for the ordinance to have clarity on garage structures, but I hope you guys could equally just consider revising the spreadsheet you use. It's something about the way the spreadsheet is that creates this negative number, negative credit. Whereas if you would have just done the calculation differently or moved the spreadsheet around, you wouldn't have these, everybody's upset because it's negative. Revise the spreadsheet. That's a different project from the ordinance language. And I also wrote for the ordinance language, number 4, better define basement.
Kara, did I see your hand up, or maybe I saw that?
No, I'm fine.
And are we in agreement that, whatever we do with this ordinance update, we're not interested in creating non-conforming, additional non-conforming homes or in the village? In fact, I think we're going to avoid some of that, aren't we?
Yeah.
we really don't know how many non-conforming homes there are. This is a challenge for Brian Berquist. There's been the assessor information is all square feet of living area, which is completely different than our floor area ratio. And so only the properties that have had building permits in front of Brian Berquist do we have any idea what the floor area ratios actually are. And so that's a very small percentage of the village. One idea Shabnam and I were chatting is to kind of randomly do a survey of, I don't know, X percent of the houses, just to kind of get a sense, how what is compliance like? A lot of these grandfathered houses might be non-compliant. We don't know.
I'll go there.
But I completely agree. We don't want to intentionally create non-compliance, but if someone has a house and they're planning to do some remodeling and they find out that they're already violating FAR and they never knew it, that's kind of a rude discovery.
Well, I seem to remember that in 2006, they basically grandfathered in all the homes.
Everything's grandfathered in, but if you do a remodel to get a building permit, this actually happened, I think, to my parents, because they had a basement that was like 3/4 of the way excavated, and they wanted to excavate the last little couple feet, and they were told no, they can't do that because that would increase the FAR of their house and they would be over. So anyway.
Okay, so are we ready to move on with fence code and retaining wall regs? Brian, do you want to speak to this for a little bit?
Yeah, sure, John. So some of you might remember this topic sort of came up during the property matter on Sweetbriar. The developer put together a plan. One of the properties has a large retaining wall in the backyard, and one of the the issues that was raised during the ZBA meeting and brought forward by some of the residents that appealed that was the concerns surrounding a retaining wall of certain height. And the tie-in was, you know, this property has that large wall. Shouldn't they, part of our code, make a individual that either puts in a retaining wall of that size also have a safety fence that lines the top of it? Or do we want, as a community, right now our village, it's pretty much, our code is silent on retaining walls in general. So do we want to, at this time, talk about some potential avenues to explore whether we want to incorporate a retaining wall section of the code, some regulations pertaining to that, limiting certain heights of retaining walls, or making retaining walls tiered if they go over a certain height, where they have to kick back a little bit and then they can continue up in a tiered fashion, or make it over a certain height. You also have to have a safety fence. So the fence part of the code was included. I didn't have a time to put the context behind why that was included in this conversation. Some might recall where it originated, but for background, that's sort of where we are. And it was one of the pieces of the overall policy in this general code that we wanted to look at and just sort of run through the commission and get thoughts and opinions on where you'd like to see things go.
Right?
You're muted.
Craig, you're muted.
Thank you. The fences, I thought, came from a ZBA meeting. Kara was talking about that, and I think that was the original item, and retaining walls kind of got added to that because they're kind of similar. But wasn't there a recent ZBA about a fence issue?
The 5-foot fence requirement has, there have been variances over the years, and and some, you know, have been requested recently to have 6-foot fences, and we sort of looked at the requirements for variances, and I think the last time we did this, one of them met the requirements, particularly because it was going to be connecting 2 segments of 6-foot fence and potentially creating an opportunity for cut throughs from the community gardens. And then the other one, actually, the homeowner was asking for a 7-foot fence and was very angry that we didn't agree to a variance in that one. But generally speaking, I think that the 6-foot fence has sort of become standard. And so there's a little bit of inequity there that maybe we can just solve by allowing for 6-foot fences. However, then, you know, I think some people who complied with the 5-foot fence requirement, like me, might, if they had wanted 6-foot fences, might, you know, there's always that concern. But that's kind of the 6-foot fence issue from my experience on the ZBA.
Shabna?
If neighbors, if it's routine and normal to have a 6-foot fence, just give people a 6-foot fence. It's everybody's having it, and some people unfortunately didn't get it on time, but it's sad to see people at ZBA meetings and them in this very difficult situation to figure out, do you really have hardship? And, you know, tell me about the grade of your property. It's a fictitious fairy tale conversation. Just give people of course they want to do the right thing, and they're going to give the 6-foot fence, and they got to find a way to justify it. But just give them the 6-foot fence. I support a 6-foot fence. Change 5 to 6.
It's also been kind of burdensome on the ZBA, to be honest, to have to try to kind of adjudicate these requests. It's not super fun. And it feels like a waste of staff time, quite honestly. I feel bad making staff sit through those conversations over and over.
Craig, before I go to you, Brian, I just wanted to clarify, we're really talking about fences that are on top of retaining walls. Isn't that right? We're really not talking about fence heights in general?
I think some of this predates my arrival for some of those conversations on the fence topic, but that I'm happy to address it all at the same time. It's here, it's noticed. Let's have this conversation.
Okay, good. Okay. Craig.
Yeah, so our ordinance, which is in the packet, talks about two types of fences. The fences that exist within the setbacks, closer to the property lines, are required to allow the passage of light through 40%. So like a chain link fence or a slatted fence. And then there's the screening, the solid fences. Those are not supposed to be within the setbacks. Those are, you're supposed to put those closer to your house, I believe. But I'm not really sure about the interpretation of that. I would kind of like if someone else knows that the regulation, the height regulation B2 on page 6 of our packet, what that actually means, because it talks about if your neighbor agrees or has written consent, you can do this or that or something. So I'm just not sure. The 5 foot going to 6 foot? Are we talking about solid fences? Are we talking about area fences? Are we talking about in the right of way, or sorry, in the setback, or not in the setback?
I mean, if we're talking about the discussion at the ZBA, which there was a request, I think, from the ZBA to have this 5 foot limit considered, and that is the B2. And those are generally, the fences that are, I mean, these are the fences around properties that we're talking about.
Okay, because
so like the fences on I mean, back and side fences, basically. We really don't allow for front fences in that manner, but it's side yards and backyards.
Yeah, because B2, if I read, again, B2 is kind of hard to read, but on the surface it says solid fences not located within the side yard or rear yard setback. So like a rear yard setback is 25 feet. So a solid fence would have to be 25 feet from the property line. Between the property line, you'd come in 25 feet, then you could have a solid fence, and then you could have your pool or whatever, and then your house. If you wanted to do it at the lot line, at the property line, then you're in the setback, then you're within B1. And those fences have the 4 foot requirement and 40% passage of light and air. So.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, B2, we're talking about the solid fences of a screening variety that may be installed within side yard or rear yards.
Excellent. So, and that's kind of a question of this language. It says, if there's written approval of the owner of any property immediately adjoining. So in these cases in the ZBA, they have permission from their neighbor?
That is how it has been done, apparently.
Okay. Yeah.
Which obviously is questionable because for a number of reasons, but I believe there were some agreements like that. There have been historically.
I hate to interrupt. I have to run. I couldn't message in the chat, but I will catch the rest of this on Facebook.
Thanks,
Okay.
Shabnam.
Oh, lucky you.
Okay. So I was going to ask, I mean, I mean, it's my understanding we don't have much in terms of retaining walls. So I don't know, Tim, if I can put you on the spot again, what you're seeing in other communities. Are you seeing tiering requirements? Are you seeing engineering review? Are you seeing fences required at the top of retainage walls that are above a certain height? Could you give, the commission some ideas on what you're seeing in other communities and how they're managing some of these issues?
I don't know I'll be able to answer super well for you all of those questions, but certainly engineering review of retaining walls over the height of about 3 feet is fairly standard. That's the point where we're looking at something that poses enough risk there. We typically see people doing some form of stamped design on something that's over 3 feet high. Beyond that, I've had a little bit of exposure. I've not seen a requirement for fences on top of retaining walls or anything of that nature. Certainly, if it does get above a certain height, then that would be potentially a consideration. And usually, that in terms of municipal space, I don't have very much exposure to it in the residential space here. But in terms of municipal space, that would be pretty standard practice there as well. That 3-foot number. Probably looking at putting some form of a fencing on that, and a lot of practices you might see along bike paths or sidewalks would be pretty consistent with that, and that fencing would probably extend all the way down to where that retaining wall kind of meets grade again. But yeah, sorry, we don't. I don't have a ton of exposure to what other communities zoning regulations are in that regard. From an engineering perspective, I just don't have a ton of exposure to that, to be honest.
No worries. Sorry to put you on the spot, but that was helpful.
No, that's
Right.
fine.
So I've done a little bit of research, and Tim, see how these things sound, but Madison, Wanakee, and McFarland both have maximum heights of 6 foot of a retaining wall. Verona requires a permit if a retaining wall is more than 4 feet high. So that's kind of like your 3-foot number. That's where you start to get into some engineering issues with anchors and how the construction is done and so forth. We don't have a permit for this, but so this would be a new thing. We do have the permits needed for fences. We could think about changing that to be a permit for retaining walls higher than 3 feet or something, or some arbitrary number. But that 6-foot maximum is kind of interesting. And in the case of Madison, it's keyed off of their fence ordinance, and that's why these two are kind of similar. Just like a fence goes above grade, retaining wall kind of goes below grade, and at least in the case of Madison, those heights or the distances are kept the same, and that's again 6 foot is the maximum. Finally, within Shorewood, we do have one ordinance, and that's the change in topography ordinance that prevents changes in, creating major changes in the area near your property line that would affect drainage into, either in or out of your property, because that affects your neighbors quite a bit. And that change of topography, can be interpreted as preventing, retaining walls of maybe some height, some minimum height. So we do have some place for these sort of rules today. I think we could look at having a permit process for retaining walls, setting a maximum height for them, setting a maximum height for like one that needs a permit, and which ones count as topography changes. There's a few places we could explore with addressing them.
What is the problem we're trying to solve?
It's a good question, Jim.
I'm just, I don't get it.
Well, a retaining wall, what if it collapses? Or what if it changes the drainage to your neighbor's house? Or what if it's unsafe if someone falls over the edge of it?
Have we had any of that?
We've had a house that's requested a 7-foot retaining wall that was right at the property line.
But none of the accident kind of things.
hasn't been built. So,
No, people falling off them or whatever you were alluding to. It just seems like we're working on a problem we don't have.
I don't know, other communities address retaining walls. You know, there's definitely safety issues. There's construction issues of doing them properly, making sure they're professional, that they don't fall apart.
I can understand all that. Do we have a problem with retaining walls falling apart or whatever that's supposed to solve? Then we probably need that. But if we don't have it, I'm kind of hard pressed to go around another circle like we just did on the floor area ratio where nobody can really identify the problem. And so it's fine. We can use the time if you want to use the time on it. That's all right. It's up to the rest of you too. I'm just baffled by this one.
I think, Brian, I think we've heard from some residents that at least in the 1202 situation, that you've got a proposal for a 7-foot retaining wall, and that there's a neighbor that lives above that. And so if they had kids on the hill and they get to the top of the retaining wall and they could fall 7 feet, and that could be an issue. But so I think some of it's being driven, Jim, by requests from residents to go, okay, here's a developer, a builder that said, well, we'll just put a 7-foot retaining wall here. Well, should there be a fence on top of that to prevent a potential fall hazard? I think it was worth exploring how other communities have handled it. Craig, you've been helpful in terms of talking about Madison's experience with the 6-foot. I mean, I think, these things are going to be engineered and stamped as part of any building plan. So I'm less worried about that. I thought it was kind of unusual to put a fence on top of one of these things, but if there really was a fall hazard, that would be something that, from one property to our next, I guess that would be an issue. With respect to drainage, we've got pretty rigorous stormwater runoff and drainage, requirements and capture, that I think are going to protect the neighborhood and protect adjacent neighbors. But Jim, the question you raise is not unreasonable. What problem are we really trying to solve?
I mean, I just wanted to note too that, like, compared to a lot of the surrounding communities, we do have a lot of very slopey lots. And I would want to be mindful of, the needs, kind of just the construction needs that just come with that sort of topography.
It's a really good point, Kara. Okay, other thoughts, reaction on this? Is this something we want to give specific feedback to Sonia on, or do we want to put it aside for a little bit, or what's the reaction? What's the thought?
I haven't found any communities that don't regulate it. I agree with Jim that it hasn't been a problem here, even despite our topography. But as people get more creative with their home construction, we're going to see more and more examples. There's one on Harvard Drive, with a fairly significant retaining wall. And it's something that I'd love to get Sonia's, what would be a reasonable thing. Is there, I think a maximum height is probably the simplest. But there may be some other very simple things just to make sure it doesn't get too far out of hand.
Okay, so Craig, you'd probably be in favor of a maximum retaining wall height of 6 feet, similar to Madison's?
Yeah.
And then if it's bigger than that, then that might trigger tiering requirements, where they step down, or?
I think it's a permit thing. Like Verona, if it's more than 4 feet, it has to be permitted. So then you need someone like Brian to say, yes, this is correctly being built. It has the terracing, the stepping back, yada yada. I mean, that would be another option, is to create a permit path for this, just like we have a permit path for fences.
Okay. I see less enthusiasm for this topic.
I mean, I think generally speaking, if we're going down the path of like creating more permits, we're kind of looking at the zoning code writ large, and we need to consider, kind of the priorities and such, because more permits is, more burdensome for staff. It can have pretty significant policy implications. So I don't know if I feel really comfortable doing this as a one-off sort of thing. And it also seems like it's kind of based on just one particular kind of instance. And I agree that a 7-foot retaining wall seems kind of dangerous. But there are some dangerous structures around the village. The quarry comes to mind. So anyway.
Okay. So is it fair to say that we could summarize the discussion for Sonia and maybe get some feedback from her on whether or not this is something the village needs to tackle now, or could make it be part of, the larger, zoning code rewrite moving forward? Would that be reasonable? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Did we want to, on the original discussion related to the fence heights, make some show of hands vote on this 6-foot versus 5-foot cap change or whatever for the good of some of the last ZBA meetings that have transpired?
We might as well, since we've had the conversation. Most of us are here, and Shabnam already gave her opinion. So I would also support, just, out of fairness and simplicity, having it be 6 feet for everyone. It's something I've thought about a lot, having been in some of those ZBA conversations over the years.
Other reactions? This is not work. None of these are. This is the discussion, so this is kind of like a straw poll. Other reactions from commission members on the 6-foot? Craig?
Yeah, well, I'll defer to the ZBA members. It does sound like a thorny thing, and sounds like 6 foot is reasonable. However, I would look at that B2 to see if these are taking place with the consent of other neighbors. How is that being? What's the process for that? What I would not want is for someone to think that they can put a 6-foot fence around their property line that doesn't have air going through it. We're very clear that when you get to the property line for the backyard, fences have to allow the passage of light and air. That's part of the airiness of where our backyards come together. And I wouldn't want people to start partition 6-foot privacy fences right to the lot line as kind of our standard.
Good
But
point.
I thought the suggestion was only to increase the height of the fence
Right.
over 6 feet and not to change any of the other parts of the regulation. So,
Yeah.
and I'm fine with 6 feet and leaving the language otherwise alone.
So 5 to 6. No objection to that?
No.
Again, not an
Go ahead.
action item. Okay.
Nope.
Good. We got that one off the table. That was helpful. All right, we've got some future agenda items. We are going to talk about ADUs again. So we've asked Sonia to kind of put something together, just kind of have an initial discussion again. I think where we left off, this was something that the public was going to have to weigh in on. So maybe talking a little bit about what that process looks like could be a good discussion point in January. Mark?
Just remind me, because as I seem to recall, when Sonia was last here and talking about that, she alluded to the fact that the state is looking into regulating ADUs. So I
Yeah.
guess my question is, if we create ADUs, make them permissible in the village, subject to regulation,
Yeah.
is is that something that would be grandfathered over anything the state would do? Or the state would essentially overturn
Yeah, be a
whatever we put
preemption.
together?
Yeah, so I think she's going to speak to that, and she's going to provide an update on the status of the legislation. The legislative period probably ends in February or March. It's an election year, so they usually don't go much beyond that. It's not a budget year. So I would think that whatever's teed up, she's going to be like, I don't have that note in front of me, what that bill was, but there's definitely a bill. It may even been a bipartisan bill. But she'll be able to update us in January where that bill's at. Maybe it's dead, maybe it's moving forward, maybe it's scheduled for a vote, maybe it's in a committee. We'll find out, and that'll help, I think, further our discussion.
Yeah, because it just seems to me that if it was rolling along and was likely to be passed, that I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time in the commission. I would
Totally
wait
agree.
until such time as we're given the guidelines from the state, and then we'll work within that. So
Right.
that's an
It's a
important
good,
consideration.
that's a good point, Mark. And that'll be part of the discussion. We thought it was important that we have an update and just kind of revisit it, and this legislative impact is something that should be considered.
Yeah, because it's kind of like that when we were going round and round on the Airbnbs and
Short-term rentals.
dealing with
Yeah.
the state regulation and so on. And it's
That's
just
right.
a lot easier if you know up front what the state is requiring.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm running out of agenda items. Our next meeting date is regular meeting date is January 13th. Great to see everyone. Hope you have a wonderful holiday. I'd ask for, oh, Craig, your hand is up.
Yeah, for future agenda item, can we put garden homes brainstorming? I think everyone has kind of realized that our garden homes overlay it's kind of in the way of development there. Madison is, I think tonight, going to be permitting cottage courts, which could be really, really cool right there, and be a happy medium between what Shorewood wants and what the property owner wants. I'd love to kind of bring that up and try to
Yeah.
address the garden homes area.
No, that's a really good point, Craig. I think we mentioned cottage courts in our 10-year comprehensive plan in the appendix, where we talk about ways to accommodate housing. So it would be good to see how that debate goes. I know you follow these things more closely than many. So if there's an opportunity, you get a good link or something on what's being proposed and the status on that, and you want to send it my way or send it Brian Mooney's way, he can share it with the commission.
Sounds good. I'll send it to Chrissy and have her disseminate it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
My only word of caution on that, John, is that I don't want to have a long discussion about the garden homes without the involvement of the property owner.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, we're just wasting our time.
that's
Just
right.
going, well, this is what we'd like. We as a community already set forth what we wanted.
That's
Okay,
right.
that's the garden homes plan.
Yeah.
So if the owner wants something else, then let the owner step forward and present it as a PUD or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just think it's a little backwards for us at this point to be saying, well, this is what we want. We already said what we wanted.
Yeah.
And we just don't have control over that property.
It's a good
Anyway,
point, Mark.
I just
No, it's a good point.
be careful about how much time we spend on it without the involvement of the owner.
Right. Very fair.
Yep.
Okay. Well, great to see everyone. Have a great holiday. Can I
Yep.
have a motion for adjournment?
There you go.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Tessa. Again, best to you and yours, and we'll see you
Yep.
next year.
Happy holidays.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you,
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
All right. Be well. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Chrissy.
Yep, good night.
Good night.